CakeFaceFam, welcome back to the channel. So happy to be hanging out with you today. Let's chat makeup brushes. ESUM has dropped a brand new brush series that is vegan. ESUM is the house brand of Muse Beauty Pro. ESUM has a history of offering beautiful, unique staples for pros and makeup enthusiasts. I have been loving the brushes for a few years now. Some of my favorites have been the natural bristle hair brushes, sable hair, goat hair. All of their brushes honestly have been amazing, so I highly anticipated this newest launch. I am a Muse Beauty partner. I have an affiliate link down below, and if you use my link to purchase something from Muse Beauty Pro, I do receive a small commission for that. These brushes were sent to me from Muse complimentary in exchange for creating this video for you guys. I have always loved their brushes, so I jumped on that. Thank you so much, Muse. And honestly, I'll probably be buying a duplicate set for myself because I really do enjoy these brushes, and I like to have the options of using the same brush type for different colors and things like that with more intricate looks. I also really love the vegan alternative, especially when working on clients, because it's just so sanitary, so durable, and easy to rely on. So I really like that. Really appreciate the movement towards vegan. It's hard to compete with natural bristles, especially when you're working with powder products. So I love when brands are innovative and push the technology to become better and better and compete with those natural bristles that perform so well. Their original vegan line is really beautiful, and I rely heavily on that line to create looks using liquids and creams, which I do a lot on my dry skin, and I have used on other people as well. Very sturdy, easy to clean and sanitize for kit purposes, or if you are a makeup enthusiast, you won't have to replace those brushes. They're really good and very, very sturdy. And originally the vegan line had this white to black gradient featuring smooth Taklon fibers. They feel silky and very smooth. And this latest launch features an innovative fiber called Vexlon, which is also synthetic, smooth, but a bit more textured than the original. And as you can see here, the coloring difference makes it very easy to spot which line is from which. This newest Vexlon fiber goes from black to white as opposed to the white to black. This new series with the Vexlon fibers is called the V series. Pretty catchy, I think. And all the numbering you'll see has a V and then a number. This fiber is specifically engineered to perform well with powder products, and this first launch consists of 8 beautiful brushes, as you can see here. In this video, I'll show you each individual brush in action, putting product on my face. And then I'm gonna talk about my overall thoughts in the collection, about the selection and gaps I see in the collection that I hope that Alphonse will fill at a later date. But let's get started with the ESUM V29 Liner Diffuser brush. This brush is a small scalloped shaped brush, and I found myself over the last couple weeks gravitating to this brush so often. For every look, I went for this brush because the size is ideal for detail work. It's ideal for right around the lash line for blending, liner, with the rest of your look or smudging out to create a really sultry eye look. It's a perfect brush for carving out the crease or anything really detailed. You can get right around your brows if you want to conceal. It's perfect for me for spot concealing underneath the eyes, hyperpigmentation, any little spots that I have. Phenomenal. I tend to have little rashes on my cheeks that are blotchy, and I also use this to cover that up with concealer and with powder, like powder foundations for extra coverage. I really enjoy this brush in many different ways. One of my favorite uses is getting right into the inner corner to apply powder that has high shine or has brightening properties, just to really get in there. It's a beautiful, very useful size for me, and it's definitely one of my favorite brushes from the line. Within the ESUM line, there is a very similar brush from the synthetic Taklon line, and it's the T09. So you can see them side by side here. Right here is the original T09, and right here is the new V09. The size is pretty much identical, as is honestly the use. I can't honestly say that if you have the T09 you need the V09, because I find the T09 works with powders as well, but the main difference is that the T09, the original T09 with the Taklon, is meant and more ideal with liquids to creams, and the V09 is more ideal for powders, but the textures feel very similar. They feel very similar on the eye. They're the same shape and size. We've got the W19, which is a natural bristle brush and longer in bristle length. I really like this W09 for things like lipstick, but I also use it on the eyes. So the next tool is a big sister to the 09, and it's the V27 Small Shadow Makeup Brush. This one is a flat paddle shaped brush. I also find this shadow brush to be extremely useful, especially when laying down pigment across the lid. I find that it applies and lays down product very nicely. No issues here. It is a little bit slicker than a lot of other natural bristle hair brushes, but as far as synthetic goes, this is really fabulous and honestly very easy to work with. It's a great size. I find that I'm able to get into the different areas of my eye very easily. I can even use this for pinpoint highlighting and for cleaning up around the eyes, cleaning up the brows, like I could with the V09, but it's just a little bit bigger. There are two natural bristle brushes that are similar within the ESUM line. We've got a goat option right here, the G27 and the W21, which I love. Another sable bristle hair brush right here, and the sizing is most similar to the G goat hair brush. The feel is a little bit more springy and flexible than the sable, a little bit more slip than the goat. Those are those three sisters. I really enjoy having this because it really picks up pigment a little bit differently from these other two. It's a good all-round multi-purpose brush. I find that I'm a little bit more careful with these, what products I use with them, because the natural bristle brushes are just ever so slightly more delicate than a synthetic option. So I'm happy to have that for my workhorse, all-purpose, no worries type of option. We've got a substantially bigger sister here, the V29, thicker as well. Within the original ESUM line, it is most similar to the W25, another sable hair brush. It's just a little bit squatter and chunkier. The pinch is not quite as thin, and the length is not as long. I've got to say, I thoroughly enjoy this brush as well. I find that it's great for around the eye, not so much for me for sweeping all the way across the lid or anything like that. It's fairly dense, so it applies a lot of product, and it's more for buffing out the edges for me or for detailed face work. I don't find that I love it for actual eye application because it's quite dense and large, and I find that it's not quite fluffy and it doesn't spray out enough to create more of a gradual buildup. So I tend to use this brush to blend away harshness underneath the lower lash line. Like with my under eye setting powder, I'll go in and I'll really get everything right underneath that might have like a sharp edge, and brow bone, temple, kind of like the triangular area between the nose, that sort of detail work that is more face but transitioning into the eye. I would say that if you tend to do your eye makeup after your face makeup, you probably don't need a brush like this because you're already blending your shadows into your face makeup. This one here is the V31, and it's described as the small round eye contour makeup brush, meant to be used for precision crease work for underneath the eye. I really enjoyed using this a few times for creating very rounded halo eyes and creating lots of depth and precision with this. It's a handy tool. It's not my favorite in the line. I think that it has specific purposes that are great. It's just a little bit larger than I like pencil brushes to be, and a little bit smaller than I like my crease brushes to be, or maybe not smaller but less fluffy and more dense. Just for comparison's sake, I've got a precision crease brush from Hakuhodo here, the J5529, and it is a goat hair brush, so we're not talking synthetic, but it's a similar size, but it's substantially more fluffy, and I find that that makes it easier for that precision crease blend. For this brush, I would say it's a little bit less useful for the way that I work and the way I like to apply powder eyeshadow, but I find that I really like this with cream products. I know you weren't designed for that, but I really like you. But like I said, it's a little bit large and cumbersome as a traditional pencil brush. You can see here that ESUM has a pencil brush that I really like in the soft goat hair, and you can see it's substantially shorter and more pointed. As far as their original synthetic line, I think that the T07 has a similar size base. It's a little bit bigger, but then it's got this really unique cut to it that I enjoy very much. So that is the V31. Okay, now for one of my favorite of the brushes, the V33. This brush right here is your standard medium blending floofy brush that I love to use in my crease to really build up the foundation of an eye look, contouring the shape. It's great for laying down those soft transition colors and really blend as you go. You can use a buffing motion, you can use soft patting and then blend. It's a really useful tool. It's the V33 and it's similar in size to the S33, which is the soft goat hair version, but a little bit blunter at the tip. The S33 comes to more of a tapered point. V33 has quite a bit more pushback than the S. The S has more give and flexibility. It's also similar to the sable version, which is the W36, and the W36 has a distinct angle to the bristle and kind of comes off to the side and is much wispier because it has a smaller diameter base point and flares out, and the V33 is denser. Okay, so here's the thing. This brush has a larger sister, the V34, and honestly, the V34 is so large. I mean, it is called the large domed eye contour makeup brush, but I feel like they went really big with these. I don't know if it's just my eyes or my style of working, but I like my blending brushes to run small enough that I can get those details in, and neither of these are quite small enough. And just like when I was talking about the beautiful V31, I wish that there was an option closer to the Hakuhodo J5529 in size and function. These two are just so large. I don't know if you can see this, but it covers most of my eye, and I don't know, maybe you can see by the spread here, it's really quite a big circumference, and the hair length is 19 millimeters with a diameter of 11 millimeters for the V34, and it's just so big, comparable to the G34, which you can see here is a lot fluffier and has more of that tapered point. So I find it a little bit more useful than this sort of blunter version, because the actual tips that's hitting the skin is just a lot bigger on this than with this more tapered point of the G34. So that is one sort of wishful criticism, however you want to put it. I wish that the V34 and the V33 both maybe came to a little bit more of a tapered point and also had a baby sister, so that I could really rely on these as my main tools. Without that option, I find myself grabbing for other blending brushes for sure, and I can't rely on this set. And as you can see here, it's a similar size as the W35, which again is sable hair and angled. And you can kind of see that comparison here. It's very, very large. Great if you've got really big eye space, you like simpler, more blown out looks without getting too much into detail, or I mean, if you can rely on those other smaller detail brushes to do all that work for you and you don't need a blender that's smaller, this is really useful. I mean, I use it similar to the 29 in the sense of blending around the eye, and I also use it in the crease and everything, but it is very big if I want to bring in depth, you know what I mean? This is great with those lighter colors, and things get out of hand really quickly if I try and pick up something darker with this size. And that's not necessarily the brush's fault, I just am wishing this initial launch also included like more detail brushes. I'm sure they'll be added over time. The ESUM V49, and this is the large powder makeup brush. It's a pretty standard powder brush size. It has a 40 millimeter length with a diameter of 23 millimeters, and it has a pinched ferrule. I find this to be really great for bronzer, especially for all over powder, for blush. It is a little bit large. Again, I think I tend to gravitate towards detailer brushes. It would be the T49, and as you can see here, it flares out a little bit less than the Taklon version, and I honestly like the Taklon version for powder and cream, and maybe even a little bit more for powders than creams, just because of how fluffy it is. And this one here, I definitely prefer with powder than I do with creams, based off of how the drag is. This one has a drag to it that I find works a little bit better with powder, as it claims to be. So you can see the size comparison here. I tend to go for sizes closer to my Shikuda Soothing Face Brush. This sort of more petite size, or maybe like my must-have, this little size. This one just covers so much of my face at once that if I'm applying any color product, this isn't really the brush I would go for. And it is meant, I think, more for setting makeup with powder, but again, I tend to be dry and I go for more detailed brushes for getting right where I need to set, because I don't go in and put powder everywhere. So this brush is great when I work on other clients and things like that, but it's not really for me and my personal use. I do prefer this other one, which is slightly smaller. It's got the angle. I do like these angle brushes for face work. This one is called the V50 Angled Blush Makeup Brush. It's perfect for blush, bronzer, highlight, face sculpting. This one is more for setting, but again, it's a little bit big for me. It covers a lot of ground, a lot more ground than I have. And I've got big cheeks, but it's just on the bigger side. Like I said, I tend to prefer angled brushes a little bit closer to this size, or maybe the Surratt. It's just a little bit big. Now, in comparison, there is a brush from ESUM line already, the P55, and you can see that this one here is really a lot fluffier, and this one is more squat and dense. This one is great for very precise and more intense lay down. It really applies product so much more opaquely than this guy right here, and I tend to prefer this a little bit more ideally for my uses than this one, which I actually tend to use with creams because it is a little bit more dense and it's got this lovely grip that picks up more powder color products than I prefer. So I did actually use this a lot this past week for right underneath my cheeks. I do have a lot of real estate there because my cheeks are so big, and for right along the jawline, but again, it's not necessarily the size I would have preferred and I will grab for as much. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts brush by brush and how I use them, etc. I find that this is a really great addition to the ESUM brush line, and I'm so happy that they're expanding the synthetic range and offering brushes that work so well with powder. I am excited to continue using these. I think that the initial launch and the variety that we have here is a fairly nice selection. I do have some thoughts about the size selections and the overall choices, but I think if you're in the market for some very sturdy, reliable, useful tools that are vegan for powder products, then these are phenomenal. And I have had these brushes for quite some time now, a few weeks, and I've tested them a lot, many times. I think I know them pretty well now, and I've washed them after each use. So I've washed them quite a few times. I can say, I don't know if this matters to you, but these dry a lot faster than most natural bristle brushes. Because of the synthetic fibers, the moisture isn't really sinking into the bristles, so I find that these are nice, especially if you're on set, on the go, and want to sanitize and have quick turnarounds with your brushes. And just as sort of a summary of my thoughts on the line, I think this range will be especially useful for pro makeup artists because of the durability of these brushes, the ease and confidence you have in sanitizing them for many different clients, and the versatility of use in the shapes that's offered. I find that the range is incomplete. It is an addition to what they have already, which is why I wanted to compare them to the brushes that they have already. But if you're new to the ESUM brush line and don't necessarily have the brushes I'm comparing them with, is this range a good set to pick up? And I would say that it is if you like your brushes to run a little bit on the larger end of the spectrum. There are detailer brushes, absolutely. You can totally do many different looks on different face shapes with just these brushes. But being fully honest with you guys, I have very high expectations when I think of ESUM brushes because I have had amazing experiences with them. I love ESUM brushes fully, honestly, and I have a lot of brushes and I have a lot of luxury brushes, and time again I go and I grab for my ESUM brushes. So when I heard about this V series, I thought to myself, these are probably going to be phenomenal, and I found myself wanting more in the size offerings. A few of these just don't fit my needs. For my face shape, for my face size, they're just really large, and the way I work, I like to be a lot more precise and a lot more detailed, and I rely on my brushes because of that over something like a sponge. There weren't really enough fluffy small brushes for me. If we're talking working with powder products, those are my staples for sure. Like something like this brush is gonna end up being a face brush for me, honestly, right around here, which is perfectly fine. You know, who says you have to use an eye brush for the eyes? But I mean, I would have liked to have those brushes be my perfect fits, and I think that the Vexlon technology is really fabulous and exciting, so I really hope that Alphonse will come out with brushes in addition to these with this Vexlon technology that will fit my needs, and I'm sure a lot of other people's needs as well. When it comes to performance and whether I would happily give up my mini Japanese handmade natural bristle hair brushes to switch over to a full line of Vexlon, that'll be a no. I think the Vexlon technology is fabulous and much better than, let's say, the synthetic range from Chikuhodo, or many of the synthetic brushes I've encountered for powder products. But this range doesn't offer the full variety and different uses that a full range of natural bristle hair brushes do. It's just not quite there yet, and I find that they're very usable, very easy to use, and very nice and reliable and beautiful and top-notch for powder brushes that are synthetic, but they're not quite there as far as competing with the top-of-the-line natural bristle hair brushes, if you know what I mean. Absolutely usable. Synthetic brushes do tend, in my opinion, to do better than natural bristle hair brushes when it comes to dealing with liquids and creams, but also when it comes to durability with frequent washes and sanitization over the course of years, and also for special effects makeup and more dramatic makeup. You can be a little bit rougher with them in general. So I'm happy to have these. I love synthetic brushes, and I still do recommend the brush line for sure. I think that if you're on the market for some fabulous synthetic brushes, you will love these. They remind me a lot of the fabulous Hourglass synthetic brushes. Those are great, but I mean a lot more sensible in my opinion than the Hourglass brushes, at least for quite a few of them, because they're double-ended and all that. Anyway, I'm going off topic now. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below and I'll try to answer them for you, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye friends.